The purpose of this video is to provide some perspective by looking at deep time data. Too often you hear that global warming is a threat to the planet, or life generally, or at least human civilization. None of those things are true, not remotely true. They're wild exaggerations. If their only goal was to urge people forward to do something about climate change, perhaps that would be fine. Go ahead and exaggerate. But the problem is there's all sorts of complicated trade-offs. The world faces a lot of other problems: disease, poverty, warfare. And we have to deal with those as well. We have to make the proper trade-offs between the problems we face. And if one of those problems is seen as a threat to life on the planet, then it dominates everything. That's problem number one. Problem number two is, if people are frightened by this thought that it's a threat to the, quote, planet or life or human civilization, and time passes and that turns out not to be true, which it isn't, then they may say, well, this whole thing is a hoax, it makes no sense, it's not important. That's not true either. Global warming is a significant issue for humanity. It could lead to significant costs being imposed on people worldwide, and particularly poorer people. So it's something we have to address. But we have to address it in an objective, fair way, trading off the costs and benefits related to global warming with the costs and benefits related to all the other things we could do with the money, such as combat disease or poverty. So, to give that perspective, let's take a look at some deep time data. So here we are. The figure shown on the screen plots two estimates of deep time temperature, one from the Smithsonian Institute, the other from a leading geology text. And you can see they're quite disparate. That's not too surprising. It's very difficult to measure what the average global temperature was 400 million years ago. That's why Professor Welsh and I plot these gray bands, which take account of all the uncertainty. But even with the uncertainty, you can see that in the past, like 500 million years ago and 300 million years ago, there were periods of hothouse Earth where the average temperature was as much as 15 degrees greater than the 14 degrees centigrade it is now. And life flourished. It was a different type of life. But temperatures far warmer than we have today are not a threat to life itself or to the planet. However, they could be very costly to humanity. Humanity arose during an ice age. And on the graph, this dashed line that goes across starting at 16 degrees centigrade on the y-axis denotes the break point for an ice age. Below, the world's in an ice age. Above, it's in hothouse. And humanity and most large mammals evolved during an ice age. Ice ages are divided into two subgroups: glacial periods, when glaciers are advancing, and interglacial periods, when they're receding. Currently, we're in an interglacial period of an ice age. And an ice age, again, is defined where there is year-round ice on the polar caps. And that's clearly the case today. We have a huge ice sheet in Antarctica. As recently as 15,000 years ago, during the last glacial period, what is now New York City was under 300 feet of ice. So when we take a deep time perspective, even if humanity were to burn all the fossil fuels without much effort to combat their effects, such as by using things such as carbon capture, life on Earth would not be threatened. The planet would not be threatened. But it could be very costly to humanity. We arose, we developed our civilization, and we built our cities during an ice age. If things warm, if sea levels rise, people will have to move. Agriculture could be disrupted. That could lead to poor people starving. So there's lots of costs associated with global warming, but they're not existential costs. And the story is pretty much the same with respect to CO2. Here are three respected long-term estimates of CO2 going back 500 million years. Our current 420 parts per million is near the bottom of the barrel. During the age of dinosaurs, CO2 concentrations were apparently between 1,000 and 2,000 parts per million. So once again, the perspective is we are facing a problem relative to humanity's recent history, but not relative to some long-run global viewpoint. So, what do you take away from this? And again, I go back to what I said at the beginning. We need perspective. We need to make rational trade-offs between the costs of global warming and the costs of combating it. And we need to make those trade-offs in light of other things that could be done with the money, such as combating disease or alleviating poverty. The long-run viewpoint makes it clear this is not an existential issue, but it is a very important practical issue for humanity.